This is the Fifine Ampligame AM8. It's a dynamic microphone with both USB and XLR connection options, a headphone port for direct monitoring, and some pretty RGB lighting to prove you're a real gamer. And it only costs around £50, but is it actually good? Well, you've been listening to it this whole time. Currently it's plugged directly into my MacBook, and I'm recording into GarageBand with no effects, no EQ, no nothing. And I think we can probably agree, as it stands, it sounds really good for a £50 microphone, right? And it does. It sounds great, but there is a few issues. We'll talk about those later, but for now let's have a look at some of the features that you do get with this microphone. Well, it comes rather nicely packaged, and inside you'll find a stand for the mic. The base has got a bit of weight to it, but it's not quite as heavy as like the Elgato Wave 3 desk stand base that comes with it, but it does have this like rubberized bottom to stop it from sliding around, so it shouldn't have any issues staying in place. Then you get the USB cable, which is 2 meters long, USB-A on one end, USB-C on the other end. Pretty standard stuff. There's the manual which tells you how to use it. We'll come back to that later. And then of course there's the mic itself, which looks really nice, to be fair. It's kind of got this weird mix of feeling really premium and a little bit cheap in places, but for what it costs, it's a good finish. The actual body of the mic feels like it's made from the exact same plastic as the Elgato Wave 3. It's like that slight texture to it, but it does feel a little bit hollow. It's so big and it seems quite hollow inside. Then like the U-shaped clamp that it fits onto, I know there's a word for that and I can't remember what it is, but that's pretty solid, made out of solid metal, no issues with that at all. And then there's the windshield that sits on top of it, and I don't know what they've made this out of, but compared to the normal foam windshields that you get, this feels really nice and premium. Like it's almost like a velvety sort of velour sort of texture to it. Really nice and different to what you would expect on most microphones, where it's just like a crunchy foam kind of feel. Do you know what I mean? And then looking at the build quality of some of it on the inside, when you take that foam windshield off, there's a really nice solid metal cage around the actual microphone itself, which is really solid. It's kind of this weird blend of really solid metal and premium feeling foam with some hollow plasticky bits that surround it. But overall, you gotta say, for what it costs, you really can't complain, right? Like for 50 quid, I ain't gonna pick it apart too much. On the bottom of the microphone, you've got your I/O, which has got your headphone jack, your XLR, and your USB-C type connector. And then on the front, there's two knobs. One is for the headphone volume and one is for the gain of the microphone. There's a kind of capacitive touch button on the front which allows you to change the RGB lighting effects. You can scroll through different colors and there's this kind of like wavy RGB cycling effect. And then there's another capacitive type button on the back which is a mute, which will completely mute the microphone entirely, so long as you're using it by USB-C. If you're using it by XLR, you'll have to adjust the gain and all that sort of stuff on your audio interface. And if you just got XLR connected, the RGB won't light up or any of that, and the mute buttons and stuff don't work by XLR. They're purely for the USB-C. However, that said, you can actually connect this to XLR and USB-C at the same time, and you can pick up the signal from both at the same time. So you could actually record 2 tracks simultaneously, one from the USB-C and one from the XLR, which is probably a really niche use case. I'm sure there's somebody out there who can make use of that for some reason. Most people, that's not going to matter, but it does mean that you can have the pretty RGB lights on while still connecting it in by XLR. So all in all, seems pretty good, right? And it sounds pretty good, right? So far, as I said, you've been hearing this directly into the Mac with no effects, no EQ, no nothing, just the mic plugged in by a USB-C cable straight into the computer. This is how it sounds right out of the box. And you're right, it does sound really good. However, there is a few issues that I want to touch upon, but before we do that, let's do a few different sound tests with EQ and maybe some comparisons with other microphones. I'll label on the screen what you're listening to at the time. Okay, first sound test, this is the AM8, but now we're plugged into the PC. Before we were into the MacBook, which is silent, so now there's a bit more background noise going on. I've left the gain in the same place that it was before, haven't changed anything else. And how does it sound? Can you hear the background noise? There's a little bit of a noise floor there by the looks of it. I can't hear it, but we'll find out when I edit this. But this is still with no effects, no compressor, no noise removal, no nothing. Just the mic on the same gain settings, but this time we're into the PC with a little bit of background noise going on. Okay, so we're still on the AM8, same background noise. This time we are running it through Elgato Wavelink and using some of the built-in effects that come on there. And the effects being applied currently are the Elgato Noise Removal, Elgato Compressor, and a little bit of an EQ on the Elgato EQ as well. How do you think it sounds? Can you tell much difference, or does it sound the same? And I just want to see how the noise removal helps from Elgato on this one. Okay, now I've turned the effects off again, but I'm now using the NVIDIA broadcast noise removal to see if that's any better at removing the taps. I'm tapping. Seems like it's still coming through if I move the mic stand. Doesn't seem to help, to be fair, but that's the AM8 with NVIDIA broadcast noise removal, which, since they updated it recently, seems to be pretty rubbish. There's no sliders or anything to adjust the intensity of it. It's just either on or off. Weird. Okay, now you're listening to the AM8, but this time we are plugged into an audio interface by XLR. I still had to crank the gain up quite a lot to get a good signal coming from it. No effects or anything like that. This is just clean from the microphone into an audio interface into the PC. Same background noise. And now you are listening to the AM8 again in by XLR, this time into an audio interface, but this time we're applying the same noise removal, compression, and the other effect, which was EQ. I couldn't remember it for a second. We're applying that this time. There you go, this is how it sounds. Now you are listening to the Elgato Wave 3. I'm talking directly into it, same sort of distance, and we have no effects. This is just the Elgato Wave 3 directly in by USB, because that's all it can do, into the PC with the same background noise. You'll probably hear a little bit more of it, and you'll probably hear a little bit more of the room, like the echoing of the room. It's not noise treated here, really. But yeah, that's how that sounds with no effects. There you go. And now you are listening to the Elgato Wave 3 with the same effects that we had on the AM8. We have a compressor, noise removal, and an EQ, all applied in Wavelink using Elgato's default audio effects that come included with Elgato Wavelink. So yeah, basic effects, nothing fancy, but that's how it sounds. And now you are listening to the Audio-Technica AT2020, another condenser mic, much similar to the Wave 3. This is plugged in by XLR into the same audio interface, and much less gain required on this one. It's probably the most sensitive of all the microphones that I'm testing here, I would say. You probably hear the most background noise if I stop talking for a second. Quite loud, no effects, no nothing. This is just the mic straight in by XLR. And now this is the Audio-Technica AT2020 with the same effects applied that we have applied on all the other microphones. So we have a compressor, an EQ, and Elgato's noise removal all going through Wavelink again. And this is how it sounds. What do you think? Okay, so this will be the last microphone we'll be testing. This is the DJI wireless microphone. And this is what I've been using in my videos a lot because it's just so convenient. You clip it on and you can be away. This is no effects, no nothing, just the microphone connected straight to the PC because you can connect it by USB-C to the PC. And this is how it sounds. And now we are using the DJI wireless microphone with some effects on it. Same effects, compressor, EQ, and the noise removal. And this is how it sounds. It boosts it up a little bit because of the compressor, I think. It makes everything a little bit more even, but this is how it sounds. What do you think? How does it compare to an actual microphone being so little and tiny? So after listening to those comparisons, you can get an idea of the difference between this and some other microphones out there. I haven't got loads to compare them to, but I've given you the best I can. But let's get on to a couple of issues, right? And one of them I think is going to be a deal breaker for the exact kind of people that are being marketed to for this microphone, right? Like gamers and streamers. And that's the noise that you get from the actual mic itself. You might notice I've been very careful not to touch it throughout this whole video so far. And that's because the noise you get is pretty bad, right? So if I touch the desk, like I'm tapping it quite lightly, but the sound goes right through my mic arm, which is this is the Elgato Wave low profile mic arm that it's sitting on right now. So it's not like a floppy, flimsy microphone arm. It's a pretty expensive microphone arm, right? And it's solid, and I don't have this issue, not to this extent at least, with any other microphone. But yeah, if I touch the desk, you can really hear it, right? If I type on my admittedly quite loud keyboard, you can really hear it. And you can, if I move the mouse around on my desk, like if I was playing a game, like it comes through the desk. It's not just the sound of the mouse touching the desk, it's like reverberating through the whole thing. If I move the mic arm at all, just a little, if I grab it, there's a lot of noise that comes through, right? I haven't got headphones in, so I'm not monitoring right now, so I'm trusting that it's coming through. That's my experience in testing it. If I touch the actual microphone itself, like, it's pretty bad, right? And even if I like touch the cable that's connected to it, again, same thing. It's really loud. Basically, if you do anything apart from sit still with sort of your hands behind your back so you don't touch anything, then it's going to be quite noisy. And for a microphone that's being aimed at streamers who are going to be banging their keyboards, banging their desk, moving their mouse around quite quickly, that sort of stuff, is probably going to be a problem. Perhaps a shock mount could help. They don't seem to make one specifically for this microphone. But even then, I think just the cable itself, anything touching the cable, which is in the mic arm, I think the sound's even going to reverberate through that. I think it's the hollow plastic body of the mic that just makes this echoey sound inside of it. Then there's my second issue, which is probably the opposite of being really noisy. It's actually completely silent. So it's the position of the mute button. If you grab the microphone to sort of that happens, you can't hear me because the capacitive mute button is exactly where, if you grab the mic at all, that's exactly where that button is. So it's quite poorly placed. And not only is it poorly placed, like the light is on the bottom side here, so it goes red when you press it to say it's muted, but you can't tell because you can't see that from where you're sitting looking at the microphone, right? You could flip it around so the knobs are on the bottom and that's on the top so you could see it more clearly, but then you've like more risk of sort of adjusting the gain midstream or mid-recording, which is another concern, and that's going to be much harder to get it back exactly how it was after you've spent so much time setting up all your audio levels and stuff. So I just wish that was somewhere else. Like, obviously, on the Elgato Wave 3, it's on the top, which being a side address mic is fine. I don't know where they would put it. Maybe put it on the front where the knobs are, so everything you don't want to touch is on one side, and then you can touch the back without having to be concerned. But I spent a lot of time trying to figure out when I was testing this mic why all of a sudden I was getting zero signal coming from it. And I was like going through everything, like looking, is the gain up? If I turned something off on the settings, have I muted it somewhere on the screen? Like, I'm trying to figure out if I applied some effect too heavily and it's just muted it. I'm getting no signal whatsoever. And it was because I'd moved the microphone and I'd touched the mute button, but I couldn't see it because it was on the bottom. That's a thing. Maybe that's just me exaggerating and making a bigger deal than what it is. But bear it in mind, don't touch the bottom, ever. Then I want to talk about the headphone monitoring a little bit. So if you've got it plugged into USB, as soon as you turn the volume up on the headphones, it's going to give you live monitoring of the microphone through your headphones, which is great, right? You want that probably at some stage, right? However, there's no way to adjust the mix between, you can obviously play your computer's audio through those headphones as well. There's no way on Mac to adjust that mix. So it's full volume monitoring and full volume computer audio, and if you adjust the volume knob of the headphones, it just adjusts the volume of both of those at the same time, so both get lower or both get louder. There's no way to change that mix, and it doesn't seem to be possible in Mac OS to actually change that. Now in the manual, which is where I say we'll come back to the manual, in the manual it does say that if you go into the old Windows control panel, like the old version of the settings, you can find under sound recording devices, you can find the device, choose properties and levels, and you should have two levels, one for the monitoring and one for the audio. I can't find that when I try to do it. I don't know if I'm going to the wrong place. Okay, so I'd like to issue a correction there. I can find the settings. So you go into control panel and you go to sound, and then within the sound settings you go to playback at the top, find the Fifine speakers, it's called speakers, Fifine microphone, go to properties, levels, and then you then have two different levels here. This one will adjust your microphone monitoring sound, and this one will adjust the sound coming through from your computer audio. So that's how you do it on the PC. And like I say, on Mac, just not even mentioned in the manual at all, doing it whatsoever. I like to have a really quiet direct monitoring coming through when I'm streaming, so that I can hear games sound really loud, but there's just enough of my own voice coming through. Because I wear IEMs and they really like plug your ears, it's just enough so that I can hear myself without like having to shout, and it doesn't make my voice sound weird. Like when you plug, you know, when you talk, if you plug your ears, that's what you can hear if you're wearing IEMs. But that little bit of instant feedback coming back through, just at a very low level, is just enough to hear myself, clear it up, and make it so I don't feel like I'm underwater when I'm streaming. But that's my personal preference. Might not be a big deal for you. So overall, what are we saying? Well, it's a really good microphone and it sounds really, really nice. And for even if you just plug it straight into USB, I think you get a little bit of a nicer sound from an audio interface and XLR. But the reason I've recorded this video purely, apart from the test section, purely by USB-C is because I think that's how most people are going to want to use it. Most people are not going to buy a £50 mic and then spend more than £50 on an audio interface to connect it to. So I wanted to kind of record this video with what you get straight out of the box. Now, I would recommend you put a little bit of EQ and noise removal or something on it. You can do that in like OBS if you're using it to stream. There's plenty of other VSTs that you can apply through different software, whatever. You're going to want to do that. Now, I haven't done that because I want to give you the raw audio. I've shown you a few of that in the comparison, and it sounds great. It sounds really, really good. For £50, it's probably one of the best sort of plug and play dynamic microphones you can get. I don't think there's another one out there that sounds better, to be honest. If there is, tell me, I'd love to try it. So there is some concerns though. The noise is a concern for me. Maybe if you can mount it to a stand that's not connected to your desk somehow, that would help. Or maybe it's not that big of a deal what you heard. Maybe me monitoring it through headphones live sounds way worse than it does on this recording. You can be the judge. That's why I've put it in there. That's why I've left it. You guys decide. But if you want to record like voiceovers and stuff like that, where you can keep your hands away from the desk and away from the microphone, you're going to get a really, really nice microphone for £50. Otherwise, just try not to touch it too much. Get it in a good spot. You're going to have to be sort of picky about where you put it. My keyboard is really loud. It does come through despite the sort of... Obviously, you get... As I move around the microphone, you're going to get the noise rejection. You can see from the back here, as I awkwardly position myself at the back of the mic, it does reject the noise quite a lot. As I come back round to the front, you'll hear it go back to normal. But like the keyboard, for example, okay, it seems to be rejecting it way better now. There we go. There's just another example of that. So it's right, my keyboard is directly behind the back of the microphone, so it does reject sound very well from other angles if you're not right in front of it. Do try and get right up on top of it as much as you can. The noise does kind of wane quite a lot as you move further away. It's a dynamic microphone. Get on it, give it something to listen to. You obviously get that proximity effect if you come right close to it as well. There's quite a lot of plosives and stuff that you would get if you pop in your P's, especially if you're right up on it. And it's got some sibilance to it as well. My S's are really pronounced in my voice. It's one of those things. It's the way my British teeth are ruined, but I can't. My S's are really, really bad. So you might want to de-esser or something on it. But yeah, it does sort of bring that out. You can change that in EQ as well, obviously. So there's a lot to think about, right? There's a lot to think about. I've been talking for 25 minutes about it now, so this is going to end up being way too long of a video. I'm going to have to try and cut some bits out. So I'm going to leave it there. You've been listening to it. You can hear it. I've told you what I love. I've told you what I don't love. Now it's your turn to make a decision, right? But my opinion, it's really, really good for the price, but the issues are maybe going to be a deal breaker for the type of person that want it. There we go. We'll leave it at that. Thank you for watching. Hit the subscribe for more videos. Lots more tech content coming up. And until next time, stay Banproof. I'll see you soon, people. Peace.